Early voting in Chicago is now open in all 50 wards through Election Day on November 5th. Remember, any voter can vote at any early voting site no matter where they live in the city. And if you haven't registered yet or you recently moved, same-day registration is available at all early voting sites. Just bring 2 forms of ID, one of which should have your current address. Go on and check voting off your to-do list and vote early. Go to chicagoelections.gov for more information. It might be getting cold outside, but it's about to get a whole lot colder at Paramount Theater in Aurora. That's because the regional premiere of Disney's Frozen, the Broadway musical, is bringing winter magic right to our backyard. Playing October 30th to January 19th, you and your family can watch Anna, Elsa, Olaf, and Sven in this heartwarming fable live on stage. Get tickets at ParamountAurora.com or call 630-896-6666 and use promo code CityCast, all one word, for $5 off. Today on CityCast Chicago, will the city lower the speed limit? What are the ballot questions you can expect to see this November? And who are you nominating for the Best of Chicago 2024? Helping me answer all of those questions, executive producer Simone Alicea. It's Tuesday, October 22nd. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. Good morning, Simone. How you feeling?
Hey, Jacoby. I'm good. How are you?
I ain't out here complaining. I just finished Peaky Blinders over the weekend. It's the first time I ever watched it. You watching anything good right now?
I finally got into Agatha All Along this weekend. I had been waiting for most of the show to be out, and it's really good. And I binged all 6 episodes in one night, and now I'm upset because I thought I had spaced that out better, but I didn't. I failed. Okay,
I haven't started it yet, but the spoilers are starting to catch up to me, so I need to kind of jump in and get it out the way. All right, bet. Simone, it's also our fall membership campaign, and I feel like that makes it a good time to welcome any new listeners to our show. You know, talk a little bit about what we do here at CityCast Chicago and explain why membership is just so important to make this all work. Because every day we try to bring you these compelling stories. We like talking to exciting people, and we get some of these great insider recommendations throughout the week so you can make the most of Chicago, but also, you know, make this city better, right? That's one of the reasons we do what we do.
Yeah, I would say our show is always a mix of, oh my God, look how cool Chicago is. Look at this cool Chicago thing. And like, Chicago, come on. Like, we could do better. Like, we could do like a little bit better. But right, it all comes from a place of love. That is why we do this. We love this city. And that's why we make a podcast and newsletter about it every day. You would not do that if you didn't love Chicago. With our fall campaign this week, I think it's a great time to remind people why we do what we do, but also how we do it. Because really, this work that you and I do every day, along with producer Michelle Navarro, newsletter editor Sydney Madden, it really is not possible without member support.
Right. If this all ran on deep love for the last 3 years, we'd be good. But in addition to deep criticism, deep curiosity, right, it's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, from researching, interviewing, editing, and we could talk about it all day. But for real, your membership keeps us in business and it helps us grow and evolve to bring you better stories, more useful guides, and just more all around. The more fun we're having, our hope is that translate on the podcast, in the newsletter, and shows up for you all as well. Plus, Simone, the listeners this week, they gonna get a little bonus. If you join during our fall campaign, you'll get an exclusive CityCast Chicago tote bag as a thank you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna be real with you. I like it. It's got some really dope stickers across it, logos, icons of Chicago. People gonna be like, hey, where you get that toe from? And you can be like, hey, it's because I'm a member of CityCast Chicago. They're going to say, oh, I'm also, I listen to CityCast Chicago. And you can be like, do you really? Because they've been talking about it for the last few days. I think they'll be talking about it for the next few days as well. And they're going to be like, oh, well, you know, I listen sometimes. Sometimes you can be like, hey, I think you should listen every day. It come out every day, Monday through Friday. It be good Monday through Friday. And so, you know, you ain't got to be jealous. Gonna be a member and get like me. That's all you got to do. And you're going to be supporting local journalism.
Absolutely. So, you know, I want you to think, dear listener, about anytime you've ever gotten something valuable from CityCast Chicago, whether you got a new perspective on a local issue, you got some great recommendation for something to do that you then went out and did with your friends, and your friends were like, oh my God, how'd you know about this? Or if you told those same friends something about Chicago that they didn't know, if you got a little fun fact out of it, that's my favorite thing. That's what I get out of listening to podcasts, is I get my fun facts that I get to impress my friends with. If any of that sounds like you, I urge you to become a member today so that you can help keep it going. Jacoby, where can they join?
You can join right now by heading to membership.citycast.fm. That's membership.citycast.fm. I want to thank all of our current members, and to those who are thinking about joining us, hey, we wouldn't be here without you. We appreciate you being here. So yeah, thank you. We appreciate you. Simone, we should probably jump into the news now, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
On Monday, a city council committee took up a couple of traffic-related ordinances. What was the big one that happened on Monday?
Yeah, so I think the big one that folks are watching is an ordinance that would reduce the city's default speed limit. It would bring it down from 30 miles an hour to 25 miles an hour. This has been in the works for a minute now. There was another big council committee hearing this spring talking about sort of how this would work and sort of why. Proponents of this really want this as a safety measure. If you're a pedestrian or a cyclist and a car's going 30 miles an hour and you get hit, that's quite a lot of force. 30 miles an hour is a lot faster than I think a lot of drivers realize from the perspective of a pedestrian or a cyclist. And so, by reducing the speed limit by just a little bit, the hope is that if you're going a little slower, drivers are able to see more clearly, right? Just like be more aware.
React with more timeliness. 135 fatal traffic crashes in Chicago last year, lower than prior years, but still above pre-pandemic levels. So the impetus to protect pedestrians, especially, is why they're considering this.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because back in May, when we first started talking about this sort of in earnest, it was interesting because there was a lot of debate around enforcement. Because right now, Chicago has these speed cameras, right, that are they're really annoying, frankly, as a driver in the city. Like, they're deeply annoying. And there is a lot of questioning around tickets and fines, disproportionately impacting people with lower incomes. And is that really the best way to sort of incentivize good driving? Again, on the other hand, there has to be some kind of enforcement, right? Like, what's the point if you reduce the speed limit and it just change all the signs, but you still have a bunch of people disregarding the signs? You haven't really done anything. The committee took this back up this week, and it seems like there's a little more acceptance in general of the fact that reducing the speed limit will make streets safer. Nearby Evanston that was one of the efforts that they put in. They reduced their speed limit and has managed to actually achieve this Vision Zero, no pedestrian deaths, goal that pretty much every city is trying to get to. There are lots of other major cities that have reduced the speed limit, New York being among them, but also, my native Seattle, San Francisco, Boston. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that after these changes went into effect, cars did move slower and that the streets were safer. There were some of the things that were brought up at the committee have to do with stuff like, well, maybe the revenue from the fines that are produced in those areas, right, where lots of violations are happening, could that revenue be used for infrastructure improvements to those roads, like in the areas where the fines are actually occurring? Like, if we're going to be ticketing people and enforcing this, what are we using that revenue for? And are we using it to the end of safer streets?
I got to ask, psychologically speaking, for you as somebody who drives all the time, when you read these stories and you see the sign change, I want to know the impact on you, because I've actually been driving the last few days. And when I'm on the highway, I ain't gonna lie, sometimes I'm a speed demon. I'm just kind of moving, sometimes swerving through traffic. It's the Chicago driver in me. But on local side streets, like just sort of, driving throughout the city, I've gotten a lot more paranoid of those speed cameras in particular, of how sensitive they are. I've noticed the increase in speed bumps across neighborhoods, especially when, like, if I'm driving through my mom's neighborhood. And so the combination of these things has impacted me on the road, and I'm a little more cautious, even if that's motivated by paranoia. What about you?
So I'm a rule follower, Jacoby. So if I see a speed limit sign, I'm mostly going to follow the speed limit, which I know makes me an outlier among Chicago drivers, based on my experience driving on these roads. I do think, like, part of this, I think, is something that it happens over time. Like, I don't think it's just enforcement that encourages people to actually follow the speed limits. Like, part of it is if you have enough drivers like me out there who see the signs and slow down, that automatically is going to sort of shift the flow of traffic to altogether be a little bit slower. When I was living in Seattle and I saw this happen, like, it definitely occurred that, like, instead of people generally going 35 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour zone, they were then going 30 miles an hour in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. Now, again, not really the speed we want cars to be going, but is it an improvement? I would say so. I mean, that's just anecdotal based on my own observation.
I think we're going to see an increase in illegal lane usage, honked horns, cussed out Simones, and the like.
I think that's entirely possible. The Transportation Committee passed this speed reduction ordinance 8 to 5. It won't go before the full council this week, but will come up before the full council at some point. And I'll be curious to see how that vote breaks down.
If you love grabbing a drink with a friend, and if democracy's on your mind this election season, and of course it is, you should volunteer with Beers and Ballots. Beers and Ballots empowers you to get off the sidelines and into the game this election season. It's a fun, easy way to facilitate conversations with prospective voters and their swing state friends over free beers. And if you were the owner or manager of a bar or coffee shop or entertainment venue, Beers and Ballots can increase your revenue and increase foot traffic by 10 to 15%. Here's what to do. Go to beers.vote to learn more about how Chicagoans can get involved and to sign up. Again, that website is beers.vote. Vote like your beer depends on it. This ad was paid for by Movement Labs, LLC.
Chicago's favorite holiday tradition is back at Lincoln Park Zoo and celebrating 30 years. Tickets are now on sale for Zoo Lights, presented by ComEd and Invesco QQQ, running November 15th through January 5th. Get ready for fun seasonal activities like photos with Santa, live ice carving, rides, holiday characters, and more, all surrounded by, get this, 3 million dazzling lights. Catch interactive light displays in the Light Lounge and grab a quick hot cocoa and other festive treats as you wander through the illuminated zoo. And be sure to check out other fun holiday events like Adults Night Out Holidays in December. Zoo Lights will start November 15th and run through January 5th. Tickets are $7 to $10 with select free nights. Get your tickets at lpzoo.org/zoolights to learn more and secure your spot before it sells out. Early voting began across the city of Chicago, and when you look at your ballot, you're not only going to be voting for things like president, your congressional representatives, and judges. There are also going to be some statewide advisory questions, and depending on where you live in the city, you could see a referendum question on your ballot as well. It is important to remember most of these are non-binding with no guaranteed legislating stemming from the vote. So Simone, let's start with the statewide questions. I got my sample ballot pulled up in front of me, and they are at the top of the ballot on the left-hand side. What are the three of them?
Yeah, so all Illinois voters will see these questions. And as you said, these questions are non-binding. That means they're going to ask you a question that you're going to have an opinion on. But the General Assembly doesn't have to do anything.
They'll go, thank you. I appreciate this. We'll put this in our report.
Yeah, nothing has to happen as a result of these votes. Basically, they're sort of glorified voter surveys. It's a way to sort of gauge an opinion about an issue. So one that people will see that I think looks a little more, kind of like it's gonna mean more than it does, is this question about taxing high income earners for property tax relief. The question's going to look like, should the Illinois Constitution be amended to create a 3% tax on income greater than $1 million for the purpose of dedicating funds raised to property tax relief? This is something that was championed by former Governor Pat Quinn. And basically the idea here is to try to gauge, more interest for what is essentially a graduated income tax or a change to the income tax, although for the express purpose of using those funds for property tax relief. We've done some reporting recently how, particularly in places like the South suburbs, where, that property tax burden is being felt very heavily these past few years. The idea being that like this kind of question is maybe a little bit easier to understand than that graduated income tax question was in 2020. But the trick here is like, this one is like sort of twofold, two levels removed from being enacted, because not only would, voters have to say yes, and then the General Assembly sort of take that to heart and be like, okay, we're gonna pass some legislation, we're gonna craft a policy around this. Because it has to do with a constitutional amendment, it would then have to go back to voters to then be voted on for realsies. And so I'll be curious to see what the results are. But again, nothing is happening to your taxes as a result of this question.
Even though the title is the Property Tax Relief and Fairness Referendum.
Yes.
Again, to be clear.
Yes, but nothing immediately is going to change in your tax bills as a result of this question. Another question that folks will see is has to do with coverage for IVF, and has to do with whether IVF, other medically assisted reproductive treatments, should be covered by insurance plans that also cover pregnancy benefits. This is a question that the General Assembly actually has been kind of chipping away at over the past couple of years, especially since Roe v. Wade was overturned. Since that decision by the U.S. Supreme Court, there have been threats to IVF. Illinois Democrats have really sort of doubled down on reproductive rights as a result, IVF and fertility treatment being a part of that. This year, there was already some expansion of coverage, particularly to get like tests, like fertility tests that you need to like then get covered for fertility treatments. But that, of course, doesn't go nearly as far as kind of this question proposes. Although, again, even though this is something that the General Assembly has shown that they are interested in, and we might even see some activity on, when the session starts next year, no guarantee that this will result in legislation that means your insurance is going to cover IVF.
This question is called the Assisted Reproductive Health Referendum. And I do want to point out the wording here does specify that it's coverage of these treatments without limitation on the number of treatments, which is very important.
Yeah, very broad.
Yes.
The last statewide question that voters will see is probably the one that is the most like the least tied to any potential.
The Election Worker Protection Referendum. And on my ballot, it's at the top.
Yeah. So this is asking if candidates on Illinois ballots should be subject to civil penalties if they interfere with an election worker's official duties. So this is sort of a response to increased reports of harassment of election and poll workers across the country, over the past couple cycles.
I mean, the current climate that we're in, the reason that we have a referendum like this is because at large, you see politicians growing and saying, oh, I can't say if I will or not, contest the results or confirm the results.
The other thing I think it's important to point out, too, is, in Illinois, we have this limit on how many ballot questions we can be asked. We can only be asked 3. And if the General Assembly sets those 3 questions, it means other ones can't get on. And there were other questions that some people wanted to put on the ballot.
Illinois Republicans was not filling these 3. They was not filling these questions. They have pushed back against them.
Yes. Like, again, of the 3 of these, this one I think is probably the most broad and the one that has sort of the least amount of like I don't know to what degree the General Assembly is going to take this up in January. Maybe they will. I don't know. But it's sort of it's the squishiest for me.
All right, so let's talk about some of the various city referendums that not all of us will see on our ballots, but depending on where we live, it may be on there.
Yeah, so all of the questions that we will see in the city are going to be sort of neighborhood area specific. There are a couple of binding questions about mental health services. There's sort of two different questions, but they're related. One in sort of the Englewood Chatham area, and then one on the near sort of southwest side. And basically, the question asks in both places. The question will ask, should there be a taxpayer-funded program created to offer free mental health services in those neighborhoods? And then, would you support funding those programs by raising property taxes up to 0.025% for properties within the area? And then, sort of secondarily, asking for sort of specific fund amounts. So a fund that of $700,000 or less in Englewood and Chatham, and a fund up to $1.2 million for the Near Southwest Side program. And so, this is about actual tax dollars, actual money. So similar to the Bring Chicago Home referendum that we saw in March, that was sort of about actual money coming out of your pocket. These questions are binding questions. They just happen to be neighborhood specific. And according Black Club Chicago did a story about these, and they're the estimate on sort of the dollar amount here of that 0.025 is something like $16 to $24 added to your tax bill.
You also got a referendum coming out of the Ravenswood area.
Yeah, so there is a referendum to repeal prohibition in like this 3-block area in the Ravenswood Lincoln Square area, and it's really fascinating story. A couple of outlets have picked up on it, and it's basically you back in the early 1900s, some residents pushed for a dry district, a district without alcohol in this sort of precinct. And it has just kind of remained for over 100 years now. And there are some restaurants over there who would really like to serve alcohol. And there are places across the street from them that are not included in this district that are allowed to serve alcohol. And it's just kind of this random, like that area is quite happening. And there's lots of stuff going on there. But it is kind of a confusing question if you live up there, because you're basically being asked, should the prohibition district remain, is sort of the way it's worded. So if you vote no, that means you're repealing prohibition. Those restaurants can serve alcohol. If you vote yes, it means you're keeping prohibition and those restaurants cannot serve alcohol. So just a weird kind of language thing there to watch out for.
I need a map to where all of these zones are around the city.
Oh, that's the other thing about this that I think is interesting is like, it's not like it's the only one in the city. Apparently this can still happen and does still happen of, certain blocks or areas being designated as dry districts for whatever reason.
People are still asking about the future of the Bears Stadium and where that money should come from. But again, it's not citywide.
No, here we've got former Governor Pat Quinn again, hanging out in our city referenda. And he's got a question to some voters in the 29th Ward on the far west side, places like Austin, Galewood. That's where Quinn lives. He lives in Galewood. Asking voters if the city should pay for a new Bears stadium with tax dollars. Quinn initially wanted a citywide question, but it stalled in the city council. Again, the state questions, it's the council if they have to decide if they're going to put something on the ballot for the whole city. But he managed to get enough signatures to put a localized referendum on the ballot. And so it's interesting because no one is talking about the West Side for a potential Bears stadium. But Quinn says that, this survey essentially can act as a citywide barometer. If a majority of the people say no, then, probably a majority of Chicagoans writ large might say no. It has no bearing on the whatever's going to happen with the Bears Stadium in the near future. But we'll know how some West Siders feel about it at the end of this.
Any other thing people should be paying attention to?
There are a few more. So we've seen this now a couple election cycles in a row. South Shore Community Benefits Agreement will be on the ballot for some voters on the South Side. There is also a localized referendum about extracurricular activities in CPS. Again, these are very nice questions, and I think it will be, I suspect they will come out overwhelmingly yes, but also they don't mean that the city council has to do anything about them. And so if you see them, still vote. So you've already gotten to the end of the ballot at that point.
This episode is brought to you by Mubi, a global streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema. Stream beautiful hand-picked films anytime, anywhere. Be sure to catch the cult classic The Fall, now streaming exclusively on Mubi in spectacular new 4K restoration. Filmed across 24 countries over a period of 4 years, Tarsum Singh's ostentatious epic sees a bedridden stuntman played by a magnetic Lee Pace spin an escapist fantasy for a hospitalized young girl. The story transports her into the exotic landscapes of her imagination, backdropped by magnificent costumes and stunning locations. Don't miss your chance to experience this film like never before. You can start streaming The Fall and more for 30 days free at Mubi.com/CityCast. You heard me right, 30 days free at Mubi.com/CityCast.
Hey, Andy McDaniel here. I'm Chief Creative Officer at CityCast, and I want to tell you the most wholesome little secret about what happens when you become a member of your local CityCast. So, like a lot of remote workplaces, CityCast relies heavily on Slack, and when you become a member, it triggers this automatic little message that everyone who works on this show can see. It says, "So-and-so just joined," with a little message from you explaining why. I cannot tell you how much these messages mean to the team that makes this show every day. It's like a ray of sunshine or a hug. It makes everyone who works on the show feel valued and that much more energized to keep doing this work to make you a podcast and newsletter every day. So to all of you who've already become a member, thank you for the boost. And if you haven't yet, please become a member of your local CityCast today. It helps this team who works on this show see how much it matters to you and how much it matters to this city. Become a member at membership.citycast.fm. That's membership.citycast.fm. And thank you.
Before we get out of here, we have to talk about Best of Chicago season, which is upon us from our friends over at the Chicago Reader as they gear up for their Best of 2024. The ballot is open for nominations through November 4th, so you can go and write in your favorite Chicago spots, places to shop, your favorite DJs, your favorite podcasts, your favorite email newsletter. Simone, when we look back on the Best of 2023, what are some of your favorite things that ended up winning?
One that immediately caught my eye was the best board game store, which in 2023 was Dice Dojo up here in Edgewater. I think any gamer in the city will tell you that Dice Dojo is probably one of, if not the hub for gaming in the city of Chicago. I mean, that is where I got all my D&D dice. It's where I buy board games for my gamer brother. I know they hold. They do a lot of gaming there. They do D&D nights and they do MTG nights and all kinds of stuff. I feel like I have my podcast life and I have my gaming life. And so it was like, fun to combine the two.
One of my favorites was Best Dance Production, and I want to shout out both the winner and the runner-up. The Fly Honeys, which is a great show that was put on at Talia Hall, a multi-day production. We actually did an episode with some of their founders and choreographers back in 2022, which I loved. And then Deeply Rooted, which is a dance troupe largely out of the South Side, which hosts dance classes for kids, adults, and they've put on so many great shows around the city. I think they have a show coming up in early November at the auditorium. And so those are two of my favorite shows that I've seen in the city. Best DJ, DJ Cash Era. I recently talked to her. It's an episode going to come out in the next couple of weeks. One of my favorite conversations over the last few weeks. So energetic. A person I've seen out in the city do perform at clubs, perform at open mic nights, perform at festivals, and just has such amazing energy every time I've seen them.
There is really no shortage of the Venn diagram of best of Chicago winners and CityCast Chicago guests is becoming increasingly overlapped. The other one that stood out to me was best sex toy shop, Early to Bed, over in Andersonville. Talked to founder Sarah Dysack a few weeks ago, which was really exciting.
And then there are just some things we love every day that maybe don't come on the podcast, like Best Adult Use Dispensary Grasshopper Club. I frequent the one off of Roosevelt and Wabash. It's one of my favorite dispensaries that I've been in. And I started off very hesitant to Chicago's dispensary landscape, and between their deals and their delight, they've pulled me in. They've pulled me in a little bit. I feel like long-term podcast listeners will hear the change in my voice towards these establishments over the last few years. Simone, what's something, if you could nominate an experience you had in 2024, whether there's a category for it or not, what's something you would nominate for your personal Best of Chicago 2024?
I think if I had to go for like best escape, maybe not best escape room, but best like escape experience, I did the Escape the Museum event at the Museum of Science and Industry this fall. And it was way better than I thought it could be. It was so much fun. This was an evening where they were sort of open after hours, and they had worked with some puzzle designers to design an escape room like experience, sort of inspired by the 007 exhibit. So you got to like pretend you were a spy and solve puzzles and, catch the mastermind or whatever. And it was throughout the entire museum. And so you were kind of getting this like after hours museum experience, but also it was puzzles. And it was just thoroughly delightful, and really more than I could have expected. For something that has an actual category, I suspect, I recently experienced for the first time Air, aka Irie Spa, in West Loop. And oh man, the best spa, hands down. I would live there. I just want to bottle up that smell and keep it everywhere. And live in that dark, wet cave. I love it. It was so good. It was so good.
Yeah, I still think about floating in the like salt pool. Mm-hmm. And as somebody who's has never been a good floater, that's just the only way to say it, in bodies of water, it was so freeing, so relaxing. Hands down a great experience. And I haven't been back since, but I think about it often.
It's on my list. I am like already thinking about the different ways I want to experience it and go back. What about you? What would you, if you had to nominate something you did this year, what would you nominate?
I think two things that are only about 1.5 miles, maybe 2 miles away from each other. One, I'm thinking the best steakhouse. My best steak going experience this year, and maybe it's recency bias because I went over the summer, but Bracero over off of Chicago and Paulina. Oh my God, one of the best meals that I had this year. The steak was fantastic. The prawns were fantastic. The oysters with the citrus, garlic butter, and cilantro, plantain, cashew crumble were fantastic. I want to go back so bad, but I think about the receipt. And it was a lot. And then another thing, which again, about maybe 7 minutes away, the Epiphany Center for the Arts. When I think of like one of the best performing centers, best places to host events, I've probably done 3 or 4 events there, all different events. And each time I've gotten like a different vibe from the building. I hosted Damon Williams' In Process album release in the Epiphany Center for the Arts Catacombs. What a space down there. It like the art on the walls was beautiful, with like intimate conversation. The lighting was great. I also did an event upstairs, a storytelling event in what used to be like the main church space on one of Chicago's like most historical churches. And it's just, man, like this building has so many different layers to it. They have like a music and like happy hour night that happens there every week that people should enjoy. It's it's slowly grown into one of my favorite places to visit. So again, the Epiphany Center for the Arts is one of my favorite performance venues, and Brazero for one of my favorite steakhouses in the city. If y'all can, stop by both of them and you can make it a day trip.
And while you're thinking about stuff you want to nominate, maybe nominate CityCast Chicago for Best Podcast and Hey Chicago for Best Email Newsletter. You can find the link in the show notes.
As always, I want to give a huge thank you to our executive producer, Simone Alicea. I appreciate you holding it down with me for the last 900 and whatever episodes. It's been a ball.
Hey, thanks, Jacoby.
And for everybody else, for more news, including the mayor's most recent updates to the city's migrant and homeless shelter systems, head over to our website, chicago.citycast.fm. That's also where you can subscribe to our Hey Chicago newsletter, which is mom's approved. Seriously, my mom called me over the weekend to talk about how she's been loving the newsletter over the last couple of months, how it's been giving her so many cool events and taking to all these neighborhoods she would have never gone to otherwise. So shout out to our newsletter editor, Sydney Madden. Of course, I can't let you go without some good news. Dance Africa Chicago kicks off this weekend in Inglewood with an amazing concert on Saturday at 7:30 p.m. at Kennedy King College before hosting dance conference all Sunday long at St. Benedict off 65th and Stewart. The theme this year is Rebirth, and I got a link for you in the show notes. One last reminder, our fall campaign is underway. You can become a CityCast Chicago member now, and not only will you get all of the good feelings and the good perks, but if you join during the campaign, you'll receive an exclusive CityCast Chicago tote bag. Just head to membership.citycast.fm right now to join. If you already a member, we appreciate you. We see you. We couldn't do this work without you. I'm going to ask every single person who made it to this point in the episode to do me one last favor. I know I've asked you to do a lot of things. Vote us the best. Become a member. Go to the website. One more thing, please. Be back here bright and early tomorrow. That's my last thing. I'm going to be here. Hopefully you'll join me. Peace.